Kim couldn't help but feel a certain satisfaction at this admission, though she kept her expression diplomatic. Sometimes discomfort leads to growth, Your Majesty. Indeed. He turned to look out at the stars. Tell me honestly, could your disruption have been worse? My scientists believe you showed restraint. Kim nodded slowly. We could have targeted critical systems, life support, navigation, defense grids. That was never our intent. We wanted to demonstrate that we could defend ourselves, not to cause suffering. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. The Imperial Academy has created a new required course for all diplomatic and military cadets. It's called the Sol Lesson. Do you know what they teach in this course, Dr. Kim? She shook her head. They teach that appearances can be deceiving. That a species' technological development doesn't necessarily reflect their intelligence or potential. That underestimating an opponent based on their apparent advancement is the height of galactic folly. He turned back to her. Your people have changed us, Dr. Kim, perhaps for the better. Back on Earth, the signing ceremony was being broadcast worldwide. People gathered in homes, in public squares, in schools and workplaces to watch as humanity officially joined the galactic community, not as subjects, but as respected equals. In her laboratory beneath the Himalayas, Dr. Lee Sora watched with her team, all of them emotional at seeing the culmination of their work. The quantum disruption technology they had developed had been intended as a shield, a last resort to protect Earth. Instead, it had reshaped the balance of power across thousands of worlds. Do you think they'll keep their word? Dr. Ryu asked softly. Lee considered the question. I think they'll try, but we'll keep improving our defenses just in case. She smiled. And we won't be sharing all our discoveries. 6 months later, Dr. Kim took her seat at the first meeting of the reformed Galactic Council. The chamber was circular, with representatives from all recognized sovereign powers seated as equals, a dramatic change from the hierarchical structure that had existed before. As she looked around at the diverse species gathered there, she caught the eye of the imperial delegate, who nodded respectfully. The fear and resentment she had noticed in the early days after the treaty signing had faded somewhat, replaced by a cautious acceptance. When it was Earth's turn to speak, she stood and moved to the central podium. Hundreds of alien faces turned toward her, some curious, some still wary, but all attentive. On behalf of Earth, I thank the Council for this welcome, she began. We come here not to disrupt or to dominate, but to contribute, to learn and to teach, to become part of this ancient and noble gathering of civilizations. She paused, looking around the chamber. But we also come with a reminder. Respect is the foundation of peaceful coexistence. Earth demonstrated what happens when that respect is absent. We hope never to need such demonstrations again. As she returned to her seat, she thought about that first mocking transmission from the Emperor. How helpless and angry she had felt, watching Earth being ridiculed. Now, as an equal member of the Galactic Council, she could smile at the memory. The universe had learned an important truth. Humans might be newcomers to the galactic stage, but they were quick studies with long memories and a remarkable talent for innovation when backed into a corner. And perhaps most importantly, they didn't take kindly to being mocked. By now you understand that humanity is not as primitive as you believed, Kim continued. What you're experiencing is not an act of war, but a demonstration that we can defend ourselves. The disruption to your communications network will continue until Earth receives formal recognition as a sovereign power, with guarantees that no civilizing mission will ever be launched against us. She leaned forward slightly. We have no interest in conquest or in seeing your empire fall. In fact, we've designed the quantum disruption to spare essential services. Medical systems, life support, and basic infrastructure remain untouched. We are not monsters, Emperor Day. We simply refuse to be your subjects. The screen went dark. The room remained silent as the Emperor processed the message. They could have done worse, the military intelligence director said finally. If they understood our quantum network well enough to disable it, they could have targeted critical systems. They're showing keen restraint, The Emperor turned, his expression thunderous. Restraint. They've brought an empire of 17,000 worlds to its knees in less than a week. Find a way to fix this, now. As the Emperor stormed out, the remaining Sha officials looked at each other in shock. None of them had ever seen the usually composed Emperor lose control like that. He's scared, Admiral Yoon said quietly. We all should be. On Earth, the mood was cautiously optimistic. The human leaders gathered in the same chamber, where they had watched the Emperor mock them months earlier. Now they watched real-time reports of the Empire's struggle to cope with the silent weapon humanity had deployed. The virus is working. Exactly as designed, Dr. Lee Sora reported. It's self-propagating along their network pathways but avoiding critical systems as programmed. And their attempts to stop it? General Park asked. Lee smiled slightly. Think of trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. They can't fix it because they don't understand the flaw we exploited. It's in the fundamental architecture of their system, a system they've been building on for centuries without ever questioning its foundations. Dr. Kim, who had returned from recording her message to the Emperor, nodded thoughtfully. How long will it take them to rebuild from scratch? Years, Lee replied. Possibly decades. They would need to replace every quantum relay in their empire. And even then, unless they identify and fix the core flaw, we could simply do this again. The Earth Security Council members exchanged glances. What had started as a desperate defensive measure had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. We need to be careful now, President Joe Yuri warned. We've proven our point. We need to make sure we don't push them from shock into rage. A wounded empire might still lash out, even at great cost to itself. General Park nodded. That's why the next phase is critical. Dr. Kim, are you ready to lead the diplomatic mission? Kim stood straighter. Yes, the ship is prepared. If the Emperor accepts our invitation to meet, we'll depart immediately. And if he doesn't? Someone asked. Kim's expression was calm, but determined. Then we wait. Their empire is in chaos. Supply lines are breaking down. Information can't flow. The longer this continues, the more desperate they'll become for a solution. She paused. They mocked us, threatened us, planned to colonize us. Now they'll listen to us. As Kim left to prepare for her mission, she thought about how quickly everything had changed. Just months ago, humanity had been afraid, desperate, backed into a corner by an overwhelming force. Now they were dictating terms to the most powerful empire in known space, all because that empire had made the oldest mistake in history. They had underestimated their opponent. The Treaty of Sol was signed exactly 6 months after what the empire now solemnly called the Silencing. The grand ceremony took place not on the imperial capital, as tradition would have dictated, but on neutral ground, a space station positioned exactly halfway between Earth and the nearest imperial colony. Doctor. Kim Ji-won stood tall as she watched Emperor Dae approach the ceremonial table. He looked different now, thinner, more serious, the arrogance drained from his posture. Beside him walked the Imperial Chancellor and 3 High Ministers, all of them eyeing the human delegation with newfound respect and lingering wariness. The chamber was designed to impress, with viewports showing the vast starfield outside and the distant blue marble of Earth. Diplomats and officials from across the galaxy had gathered to witness what many were already calling the most significant treaty signing in 1,000 years. Kim found it hard not to think about how much had changed since that first mocking transmission. The same emperor who had laughed at Earth's primitive rockets now approached humans as equals, perhaps even with a touch of fear. Dr. Kim, the emperor said with a formal bow of his head, your people have prepared a remarkable ceremony. Thank ye. Are you, your majesty? Kim replied. We believe historic moments deserve proper recognition. There was an unspoken tension in those polite words. Both of them knew what had brought them to this moment, humanity's devastating demonstration of power against an empire that had dismissed them. President Joe stepped forward, her simple blue suit a stark contrast to the emperor's ornate regalia. Shall we proceed with the signing? The treaty itself was surprisingly short for a document of such importance. Its core principles were simple. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign power with full rights in galactic society. The civilizing mission would be permanently cancelled. A new protocol would be established for making contact with emerging civilizations, one based on respect rather than conquest. But the most significant part came at the end. Earth would share part of its quantum disruption technology as a gesture of good faith, helping the Empire rebuild its shattered communications network. Not all of it, humanity wasn't that trusting, but enough to show that humans wanted peaceful coexistence, not domination. As the Emperor signed with a ceremonial stylus, Kim watched his face. There was resignation there, but also something that looked like genuine reflection. When it was her turn to sign, she felt the weight of all humanity behind her hand. This wasn't just a diplomatic document, it was humanity's official entrance onto the galactic stage. With this treaty, President Joe announced to the assembled dignitaries and the billions watching via broadcast, we begin a new chapter in galactic history, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in civilization. The formal part of the ceremony complete, the gathering shifted to a reception area where humans and aliens mingled cautiously. Kim found herself approached by the Emperor himself, who had dismissed his usual entourage of advisors. "May we speak privately, Dr. Kim?" he asked. They moved to a quiet corner with a view of Earth in the distance. "I must admit," the Emperor said after a moment of silence, "I have been reviewing our first transmission to your world, the one where He seemed to struggle for the right words. "Where you mocked us," Kim finished for him. He inclined his head slightly. "Yes, I have ruled for 260 years, Dr. Kim. In that time I have overseen the integration of 93 worlds into the Empire. Never once did I consider that our approach might be—" Again he hesitated. "Arrogant?" Kim suggested. "Disrespectful." The Emperor looked at her directly. "Both. The silencing has taught our people much, not just about your capabilities, but about our complacency. We had grown too comfortable in our power." Then every screen on the bridge lit up simultaneously. A human face appeared, a woman with calm eyes and short black hair. "Imperial Fleet," said Dr. Kim Ji-won, her voice translated perfectly into the Imperial language. "This is Earth. We received your transmission." Bayek stared in shock. How had they taken control of his ship's system so easily? "You seem confused, Admiral Bayek," Kim continued, and the use of his name sent another jolt of surprise through him. "Perhaps you're wondering why your quantum communication network isn't functioning, or how we accessed your ship's systems, or how we know your name." Beck found his voice. "Return control of my ship immediately, or face the consequences." Kim's expression didn't change. "The consequences? Like the civilizing mission you planned for us? The one where you would strip our planet of resources and turn our people into subjects of your emperor? How could you possibly—" Beck stopped himself, suddenly understanding. "You've been listening. On Earth, in the command center of Operation Underdog, Specialist Choi Min-ho watched the exchange on the main screen while his fingers danced across his control panel. As the head of Earth's Cyber Warfare Division, he had spent years preparing for this moment. All systems performing exactly as designed, he reported to General Park, who stood behind him. The quantum disruption field is holding stable. Their entire fleet is cut off. Park nodded, his face grim but satisfied. "And our message?" "Being transmitted to not just their fleet, but to every Imperial outpost within 50 light-years, Choi replied. "Thanks to their own relay stations that we borrowed." On the Imperial flagship, Bayek was coming to the horrifying realization that he had severely underestimated his opponent. These weren't primitives cowering before superior technology. These were dangerous, cunning beings who had somehow compromised the most secure communication system in the galaxy. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Kim's image smiled slightly. "First you will listen. We heard every joke, every insult, every plan your empire made about Earth. We listened as your emperor mocked us, as your scientists discussed which of our cultures were worth preserving as curiosities, as your military planned which cities to occupy first. Each word hit back like a physical blow. Impossible. They couldn't have been monitoring Imperial communications. No primitive species could break those encryptions. Perhaps you should have studied our history before mocking us," Kim continued. Humans don't take kindly to bullies. We've spent thousands of years fighting among ourselves, Admiral. We've become very, very good at warfare. And now, thanks to your Empire's carelessness, we've had years to study your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. Around the Earth, thousands of small satellites, invisible until they activated, formed a web that now engulfed the Imperial fleet. They weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were something far more dangerous, the delivery system for human ingenuity. You have a choice, Admiral, Kim said. Return to your Empire. Tell them that Earth is not open for colonization. Tell them what happened when you threatened us. Or... She left the alternative unspoken. Beck looked around his bridge at the failing systems, at the stunned faces of his crew. They had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had walked into a trap set by a species that the Empire had dismissed as primitive. "This isn't over," he said, trying to sound threatening despite his growing fear. Kim's expression hardened. "For your sake, Admiral, I hope it is, because what you've experienced today was just our warning shot." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in silence. Bayek stared at the now blank screen, then at the blue planet that suddenly seemed far more dangerous than any world he had encountered before. "Set course away from this system," he ordered quietly. "Maximum speed." As the Imperial ships turned and fled, humanity watched from their blue planet, united in a way they had never been before. The Empire had mocked them, threatened them, underestimated them. And now the Empire was afraid. The Imperial Palace on the capital world had never known such chaos. Emergency alarms blared through crystal hallways where calm had reigned for centuries. Officials in ornate uniforms rushed from room to room, their usual dignity forgotten, as panic spread faster than the failing communication systems could track. Emperor Day paced in the grand strategy chamber, his blue skin now pale with stress. Around him, his most trusted advisors and military leaders spoke over one another, their voices rising with each new report of disaster. "The entire Orion sector is dark. We've lost contact with the mining colonies in the Cygnus Arm. Financial systems are collapsing in 3 major hubs." The Emperor raised a hand and the room fell silent. "Explain to me," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "how a primitive species that has barely left its own moon has managed to cripple the communications network of an empire that spans 17,000 worlds." No one spoke. No one had an answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Admiral Yun, who had replaced the disgraced Admiral Bayek after the Earth disaster, finally stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the humans used our own network against us. The virus they planted spread through our quantum relays following pathways we built." "A virus?" The Emperor's voice dripped with skepticism. "We have the most advanced cybersecurity in the galaxy. Our systems have withstood attacks from civilizations far more advanced than these humans." The science minister, a thin woman named Han, cleared her throat. "That's just it, Your Majesty. They didn't try to break through our security. They found a fundamental flaw in the quantum entanglement matrix itself. A flaw we never thought to look for, because the technology has worked flawlessly for over 800 years. The Emperor stared at her. "Are you telling me that these primitives understood our technology better than we do?" "Not better," Han said carefully. "Differently. They approached it with fresh eyes, with desperation." She hesitated before adding, "And they had motivation we lacked. We've been complacent." The Emperor turned away, looking out at the gleaming towers of the capital city. Just days ago, this had been the heart of the most powerful civilization known to exist. Now, chaos was spreading through the streets as citizens realized that something unprecedented was happening. Without the quantum network, faster-than-light communication was impossible. Information now traveled at the speed of light, meaning messages between star systems would take years. An empire built on instantaneous control was suddenly fragmented into isolated worlds. "How bad is it?" the Emperor asked finally. Admiral Yun consulted his tablet, one of the few devices still working. "Approximately 60% of all Imperial systems are affected. The disruption is spreading along predictable lines, following our communication routes exactly. Military command structures are breaking down. Supply chains are failing. The Imperial Exchange has suspended all trading after values dropped by 40% in a single day. The Emperor closed his eyes briefly. And these humans, have they made any demands? A communications officer stepped forward nervously. Yes, Your Majesty. A message was broadcast from Earth 3 hours ago. It's addressed to you personally. Show me. The main screen lit up, showing Dr. Kim Ji-won sitting at a simple desk. Behind her was a window showing Earth's blue sky and green trees, a deliberately peaceful setting that somehow made the message more unsettling. Emperor Day, she began without preamble. I am Dr. Kim Ji-won of Earth. We have not been formally introduced, though I remember well your broadcast where you found our diplomatic greeting so amusing. Several advisors glanced uncomfortably at the Emperor, who stared stonily at the screen. Box toward her. What they were building wasn't just a satellite, it was a trap. When the Empire's ships arrived, and intelligence suggested they would arrive within months, this network of satellites would be humanity's first line of defense. Not with weapons, but with something potentially more powerful. Do you ever wonder if we're going too far? Her colleague asked, watching as Song connected delicate components with practiced hands. Song thought about it as she worked. They're coming to take our planet, she said finally. They want to turn us into a footnote in their history books. I think we have a right to show them we're more than that. Across Earth, similar conversations were happening as Protocol Underdog ramped up. Some questioned the aggressive response, many worried about provoking an enemy with vastly superior technology. But as more details of the Empire's civilizing plans were intercepted, the resource extraction sites they had already mapped, the human populations they planned to relocate, doubt gave way to resolve. In his office at Earth Defense Command, General Park Hyun received updates from all Protocol Underdog teams. The progress was remarkable. Humans had always been at their most innovative when under threat, and the challenge of standing up to a galactic superpower had pushed them to achievements that would have seemed impossible just years earlier. Sir, his aide said, entering with a tablet, we've intercepted new transmissions. The Empire has moved up the timeline. Their ships will enter our solar system in 3 weeks. Park took the tablet, scanning the details with a grim expression. Inform all team leaders. We're accelerating the schedule. Will we be ready in time? The aide asked. Park thought about Dr. Lee's breakthrough, about Captain Kang's stealth mission, about the thousands of brilliant minds working day and night across the planet. We'll have to be, he said, because if we're not, there won't be a second chance. As he looked out his window at the bustling city below, people going about their daily lives, most of them unaware of the threat hanging over their world, he felt the weight of what they were planning. The Empire had mocked Earth. Soon, they Hamang would learn just how dangerous it was to underestimate humans. The Imperial fleet arrived with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm. 12 massive warships, each larger than Earth's tallest skyscrapers, emerged from faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of Neptune. Their hulls gleamed with a metallic sheen that no Earth material could match. Weapon ports lined their sides like rows of sleeping eyes. Admiral Beck, commander of the Imperial Civilizing Force, stood on the bridge of his flagship with his hands clasped behind his back. Through the massive view screen he could see the distant sun, and closer to it the tiny blue dot that was his target. Readings on the human planet? He asked, not bothering to use its name. To him it was simply Acquisition Target 6291. No significant. Change in their defense capabilities, Admiral, reported his second-in-command. Their primitive satellites are still in the same orbits. No sign they've even detected our arrival. Beck allowed himself a small smile. This would be the easiest assignment of his career. The Emperor had ordered a show of force before the actual resource extraction began. Standard procedure for bringing primitive species to heel. Send the announcement transmission, Beck ordered. Full broadcast on all their communication channels. Let's see how quickly they surrender. The message was simple and had been used hundreds of times before with other primitive worlds. Submit to Imperial authority or face annihilation. The humans would be given 24 hours to respond, though in Bayek's experience, most species surrendered within minutes of seeing the Imperial fleet. But something strange happened. Nothing. No response came from Earth. No panic on their broadcast channels. No desperate pleas from their leaders, not even a single missile launch in a futile show of defiance. Just silence. "Are we sure the transmission went through?" Bayek asked after 30 minutes of eerie quiet. "Yes, Admiral. We've confirmed it reached all their major communication networks." Beck frowned. This wasn't the usual pattern. Even the most primitive species reacted somehow. "Move the fleet closer," he ordered. "Let's make our presence more immediate." The massive ships glided forward, engines pulsing with controlled plasma bursts, until they passed the orbit of Mars. Still no response from Earth. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "I'm having trouble establishing a connection with Imperial Command." "What do you mean, having trouble?" Beck snapped. "Use the quantum channel." "I've tried, sir. It's not responding. In fact—" The officer's voice trailed off as he checked his readings. "None of our quantum communication systems are functioning." For the first time, Bayek felt a flicker of unease. The quantum communication network had never failed in the history of the Empire. It was theoretically unbreakable. "Run a diagnostic," he ordered. Before the diagnostic could even begin, more reports flooded in. Ships throughout the fleet were experiencing the same issue. All quantum communications were down. They were cut off from the Empire. "It must be solar radiation," Beck said, though he knew that was impossible. Quantum entanglement wasn't affected by physical phenomena like radiation. "Move us closer to Earth. Perhaps the interference will lessen." As the fleet approached Earth orbit, tension on the bridge grew. Without the quantum network, they were limited to light-speed communications, practically useless over interstellar distances. They were alone, 12 ships in a foreign solar system, suddenly unable to call for help. "Sir," the sensor officer's voice was tight with alarm. "I'm detecting energy signatures activating around Earth. Thousands of them. They weren't there a moment ago." On the main view screen, tiny points of light winked into existence around the blue planet. Not weapons, at least not any weapons the Imperial ships recognized, but something. Dr. Kim Ji-won had never expected to make history quite like this. As the head of Earth's first interstellar diplomatic mission, she had prepared for many potential outcomes, but being openly mocked by the leader of the Galactic Empire wasn't one of them. It happened during what should have been a formal introduction. Kim and her team had spent months crafting the perfect message, respectful, peaceful, but also proud. They represented all of humanity, after all. The transmission had been sent with hope and anticipation. What came back changed everything. The large screen in Earth's United Government chambers showed Emperor Day, a tall figure with shimmering blue skin, holding up Earth's carefully prepared message to his court. "Look at this," he said, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into English. "They call these rockets advanced technology." The court erupted in laughter. Kim felt her face burning as she watched. Beside her, representatives from every major nation on Earth sat in stunned silence. "They've barely left their own moon," continued the Emperor, "and they think they can join galactic society? Perhaps in another 1,000 years." More laughter followed. Someone in the Emperor's court made a crude joke about humans still using combustion engines, which set off another round of mockery. What the arrogant Emperor didn't know, what none of the supposedly advanced species of the Galactic Empire realized, was that humans had been listening for decades. 30 years earlier, a small research station in Antarctica had picked up unusual signals from deep space. Instead of broadcasting this discovery, Earth's governments had made the collective decision to listen and learn in secret. During those 30 years, brilliant minds like Dr. Han Sunwoo had worked tirelessly to understand and reverse engineer the quantum communications technology the Empire used. They couldn't build starships yet, but they could eavesdrop on the Empire's most secure channels. Kim glanced at General Park Hyun, who sat with perfect military posture, despite the humiliation playing out on screen. Their eyes met briefly. They had discussed this possibility, that first contact might not go as hoped, that the older spacefaring civilizations might look down on humanity. But there was a difference between being seen as junior partners and being treated as a cosmic joke. The Emperor was now mimicking human speech patterns to the delight of his court. "We come in peace," he said in a deliberately slow, dumb-sounding voice. "Please share your wisdom with us, O great space people." Kim noticed how General Park's hand tightened slightly on the armrest of his chair. They had both lost sleep over whether their backup plan was too extreme, too provocative. Now, watching Earth's sincere efforts being turned into entertainment for alien aristocrats, those doubts were fading fast. The mockery continued for nearly 20 minutes. The Emperor and his advisors discussed Earth as if it were a particularly amusing pet, cute but ultimately insignificant. They even began planning what they called a civilizing mission to Earth, discussing which resources they would extract first and which human cultures they might preserve for scientific interest. When the transmission finally ended, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. President Joe Urey of the United Earth Government stood up slowly. "We've heard enough," she said, her voice steady despite the anger visible in her eyes. "Are we in agreement?" One by one, the world leaders nodded. There had been many disagreements during planning, many arguments about how to approach first. Contact. Now faced with the Empire's contempt, humanity found itself united. General Park looked to Kim, waiting for her assessment as the head of the diplomatic mission. "They've shown us who they are," Kim said quietly. "And they've shown us how little they respect diplomatic approaches." She took a deep breath. "I believe Protocol Underdog is now justified." The general nodded and pressed his thumb against a small scanner built into his tablet. "Implement Protocol Underdog," he said clearly. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, hidden facilities hummed to life. In underground bunkers, orbital stations, and secret bases on Mars and Europa, teams of scientists and engineers who had been on standby for years received their activation codes. Dr. Kim looked around the room at the determined faces of Earth's leadership. None of them had wanted this outcome. All of them had hoped for a peaceful, respectful first contact. But the Galactic Empire had made a critical mistake, one that many bullies throughout human history had made before them. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. They had mistaken patience for weakness and technological gaps for intellectual inferiority. Most importantly, they had mocked humans within earshot. "The Emperor thinks we're primitive," Kim said, standing straighter now. "He thinks we're harmless. In 3 months, when Protocol Underdog is fully implemented, he'll learn that humanity doesn't take kindly to being threatened, and he'll learn that sometimes the quietest species are the ones you should fear most." As she walked out of the chamber with General Park, Kim allowed herself a small, grim smile. The Empire had no idea what was coming. Their mockery of Earth was about to become the most expensive joke in galactic history. The Galactic Emperor had stopped laughing, but his mockery of Earth continued. Now it was taking the form of educational programs broadcast across 17,000 worlds, showing humans as primitive curiosities who had somehow stumbled onto the galactic stage before they were ready. "Look at these creatures," a popular Imperial science show host would say. "They still fight among themselves, they still burn fossil fuels. They think digital computers are advanced technology." But while the Empire laughed, Earth worked. Deep beneath the Himalayas, Dr. Lee Sora hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. Her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but they sparkled with excitement as she reviewed the data one more time. "It's definitely there," she told her team, pointing to the pattern on her screen. "Every quantum transmission from the Empire has the same flaw." Her second-in-command, Dr. Ryu Jun, leaned closer. "How did they miss this? They've been using this technology for centuries." Lee smiled as she sipped her cold coffee. "Because I didn't need to look. When you're on top for that long, you stop checking for weaknesses." The flaw was subtle, a slight instability in the Empire's quantum entanglement matrix, the technology that allowed instant communication across vast distances of space. The Empire had perfected it to a point where they considered it unbreakable, but they hadn't pushed it further, hadn't tested its limits the way the desperate, determined scientists of Earth were doing now. "If we introduce a cascading feedback loop here," Lee said, "their entire network will collapse. Every relay station, every communications hub, every quantum receiver, they'll all go down simultaneously." "For how long?" asked Ryu. "With the virus we've designed? Months, at least. Maybe years if they can't figure out what we did." The scientists looked at each other. They weren't soldiers or politicians. They had spent their lives advancing human knowledge, not planning attacks. But the Empire's threats couldn't be ignored. The civilizing mission they had discussed would mean Earth's resources stripped, its cultures catalogued like museum exhibits, its people treated as curiosities at best, servants at worst. Halfway across the world, Captain Kang Tai-ho was thinking similar thoughts as his team prepared for the riskiest mission in human history. 6 stealth spacecraft, the first humans had ever built capable of reaching the outer solar system in days rather than years, were being loaded in a secret facility beneath the Pacific Ocean. "Final systems check," Kang ordered, his voice steady despite the pressure. This would be humanity's first mission beyond the orbit of Pluto. If they were detected, the Empire would know humans were more advanced than they appeared, and the element of surprise would be lost. The ships were technological marvels, incorporating everything humans had learned from studying Imperial transmissions. They weren't as advanced as Imperial vessels, but they had one critical advantage. They were designed from the ground up for stealth. Earth had millennia of experience with warfare and espionage that the complacent Empire lacked. All systems. "Green," reported Lieutenant Jin Hana, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Stealth systems at optimal levels. If their sensors work the way we think they do, we'll be invisible." Kang nodded, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Their mission was to place microsatellites near key Imperial relay stations at the edge of the solar system, the Empire's first line of communication with Earth. These microsatellites would appear to be nothing more than space debris, but each contained the virus Dr. Lee had developed. "Launch in 5 minutes," Kang announced. "Remember, absolute radio silence once we're past Jupiter. Even a whisper could give us away." As the countdown began, he looked at the faces of his crew, the first humans who would travel to the very edge of their solar system. They were scared, of course. But there was something else there, too. Pride, determination, the knowledge that they were defending their home. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, another team was working on a different aspect of Protocol Underdog. Engineer Song Mina floated, in zero gravity, carefully assembling what looked like a simple communications satellite. "Pass me the quantum receiver," she said to her colleague, who pushed a small black,